stacks on her mind, grinding all day, hustle refined, shattering ceilings, she's fierce and untamed. Boss is her title, wealth is her game.
Welcome back to the Hiring Woman podcast. And a show we dedicate to financial conversations accessible so that hiring women can make confident financial decisions and live the life they truly deserve. So if you've been riding with us for a while, you know I love connecting music and the topic we're going to discuss today. And right now, we have been listening to Hiatus Coyote. And the song is By Fire. Hiring community, are you familiar with this song? Because I can tell you, I just heard this song recently and I thought it'd be just so perfect for what we're going to be talking about today. I just kind of want you to check out the lyrics from this woman. She basically says, a woman that rests night and day, sweat and tears untold, to undress the burden that caress the blessed, I'm told. Meet you in the future bold, a bell that rings in the chest of stories told. My goodness, this artist is a
Wow.
honestly. And as I was listening to the lyrics and thinking of the title of this song, By Fire, it just made me think about the journey of the hiring woman, especially the ones that identify as the breadwinner in their families. In most households, men are typically the breadwinners, right? But this is changing. I don't know if you know this, but 29.5% of Canadian women identify as the breadwinner, and that really means earning more than half of what their partner earns. So what burdens do these women carry? How does the breadwinner actually impact their relationships? What's expected from them based on societal expectations? What do they expect from themselves? Truly, there's no blueprint for these women. And so many of my clients tell me that it's difficult to be in a space like this because sometimes it actually means it can be really lonely. And it may make you feel like not everyone's rooting for you, even in your own home sometimes. And I say that from my personal experience as well. So the song By Fire is to say some of these women feel like they're leading by fire. And to discuss this important subject, I'm so grateful for our guest today. Today, I'm joined by Angela Payne, the founder and owner of Lead HR. Angela has built an incredible career in HR leadership and entrepreneurship, helping businesses actually transform the way they think about people and about culture. But today's conversation isn't just about business. It's also about what it means to step into the role of the breadwinner in your family. So I want to actually talk about how that role has shaped Angela's journey and the lessons she's learned about choosing a partner who truly supports your vision. Angela, you are the perfect guest for this. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I love that song. I had not heard it before today, so I'm now going to go find that song on my Apple Music and download the whole thing and groove out to that a little bit more on my car ride home.
That artist is actually, I heard about her a few years ago. She won the Best New Artist for on the Grammys, like a 2020 or 2021. She has so many amazing songs. She's a really, really powerful voice. So yeah, you'll dig into her on Apple Music Essentials.
I will.
Let's start with your professional journey, because for listeners who may not know, can you tell us a little bit about Lead HR and even what inspired you to start your own?
Yes. If someone had told me, 6 years ago, I would be an entrepreneur, I would have said, like, no way. I spent my whole career in Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, right? I sort of grew through the ranks of international and organizations, European-based organizations and North American organizations. And so I'm not sure, I ever thought to myself, "Ooh, one day I'd love to open my own business." And that I'm not sure it came to me. I enjoyed the perks of corporate and the travel and all these things that sort of came with growing my career in a very corporate uh, space. Um, but I also think that at some point, and maybe inspired by my parents, because both of my parents are entrepreneurs. So, maybe somewhere in there was this. I
It
just
doesn't
didn't.
fall far from the tree usually.
Yeah, maybe I just hadn't tapped into it yet, or found something that I was really passionate about to actually start a business on. But I sat in corporate boardrooms and sat amongst CEOs and CEOs and CTOs and CIOs and every chief you can imagine of what that C-suite title looks like, and there was a time that I was looking at those roles and thinking to myself, wow, in leadership, there requires some levels of emotional intelligence that's needed at all these different kinds of roles in leadership in general. And it really stuck with me. And my now business partner and I worked in the same organization for many years during our careers at different times with different organizations. And we got to this idea of emotional intelligence in leadership and really what it means to be an influential leader and how you show up that way. And that really got us to, wow, that's the business. And that's really what inspired us to start. So our own journey of leadership and our own journey of emotional intelligence, and then how we could really make a difference by inspiring other leaders to show up as the best version of themselves. That's really what has got us there 5.5 years ago.
Yeah, and that's a big pivot. And I know you did it in COVID, which wasn't an easy start a business, but clearly the passion was there for you to push forward and be so successful at it now.
And
Now,
maybe a bit of what is that? Blind optimism? I'm not sure.
well, it's a disease all entrepreneurs suffer from. You
Yes,
have to
yes,
have
yes,
blind optimism, I believe.
yes.
You have to definitely be afflicted with that to keep going. Let's talk a little bit about HR. And really, it's such a people-centered field. And I would love to know what one of the biggest challenges you see businesses facing right now when it comes to leading people well.
Yeah. And that, interestingly enough, when I talk about my journey of leadership, all of the businesses I was in my whole career were in the human capital space, right? So they were always in the HR field. So I didn't sort of just go out to that field. My whole, career in my 20 plus years were always in the human capital market. And so, yes, all different kinds, succession planning and outplacement and recruitment and talent and, coaching and leadership development. And so one of the things that's interesting about this space is that it is, really driven by exactly what you said, that at the core, to get anything done is done by the people. Yes, now, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the advent of technology and how that changed HR, and now where we are with AI. Yes, all those things are true, and still not, but and still the core of that happens at the emotional level of people that you have in your business, your culture, how you are led and what drives productivity and organizational performance. And so that is still done by individuals. And the critical part of that will always be done by individuals. And so this is, some of the biggest challenges we see is just trying for people, the human who is trying to, be the best version of themselves, how they navigate this so difficult and complex world that I think was always complex, but just is speeding up the pace of the complexity. It's not like it went from non-complex to complex. It more just went from complex and then with less and then faster and then, and so
even
on.
faster. Even faster.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the way you break that down, that ultimately it's people who do things. People are complex, then society's technology, all of these things are becoming more complex. So you put those two things together and then you try to get something done with of course, a very optimistic entrepreneur, and you need support. You absolutely
Yeah.
need support on
Yes.
that.
Yes. Yes.
So that being said, what are you excited about? What in the HR world is exciting you? What opportunity is exciting you right now?
Oh my gosh, there's so many because I think that I actually do think, generationally and from the people coming into the market and people coming in out of schools, and that's another challenge around the opportunities. But if you think about what people expect from their leaders, what people expect from their organization, this is changing, right? This is not just like, give me a job, give me a paycheck, give me purpose, give me something to look forward to, help me make a difference. And so the conversation of emotional intelligence, while not a new conversation, is one that is continues to gain momentum in the market. And so for that, I'm super excited about that, because that helps you think about how can I help you show up as the best version of yourself? What are the tools you need? The how to of being able to do that in your work, right? Because we are complex people. We come to work with, you know, having been cut off in traffic in the morning, having your baby up sick all night, having like all these things that happen to us. That whole person doesn't change when they sort of walk through the door, even though there's a couple of cool shows about that. This is really real life. And so how do you regulate and understand that, and how do you use that? So I'm really excited about this real adoption and this real interest in making sure that we can help people lead with empathy, use their emotional expression, be more self-aware. And I think COVID actually spurred that on, because we needed those things to create more connection, to create
Yeah.
more relationships, and all these things. So it actually was accelerated, I think, by COVID in some ways.
I think so, and I think business leaders realize that to move things forward, because you need people, you need tools, you need ways of, as you said, understanding your employees better, so that they can lead better and you can lead better. And it really sounds like this this lens, the emotional intelligence lens, really gives so much opportunity to help with that process of finding the people, and
Yeah.
having a way to relate to the people that
Yeah.
pushes everything forward too.
And that's a muscle, right? That's not a like a yes or no skill. That's not like your IQ, like you have it or you don't have it. That's like, no, if I want to show up better, how can I use these skills? How can I work on these skills to be better at it? And just like a muscle, when you exercise it and when you put time into it, that changes the way that your behavior, and can change your behavior if you're committed to it.
Yeah, and even attracting, like, because the other thing with bringing people on, and I face it as a business owner myself, is making sure I'm attracting the right people to my team that are aligned with some of the goals that I want to achieve. And
Mhm.
I think because so much of leadership and business success comes down to that, along with the tools,
Mhm.
you really need that alignment, you need that support, you need that trust. And I think all those things actually connect really beautifully to what we're going to talk about today as well, which is your experience as the breadwinner in your family, and what that role has meant to you, both the challenges and the opportunity. I would love to get your take on that.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting to me because at times it's fluctuated, right? This has not always been the story of my whole career. So it's an interesting evolution that's ebbed and flowed, and I think that's part of both the beauty and the challenge of it. Because when you meet your spouse like I did in school, you
Wow.
start from nothing. You both start from the same place, right? You start from maybe having debt, maybe having school debt, but what you built is built together. And so there's different paths that you took along the way, and different things that either pushed you into one version of that or another. And I think that, then how did the unit or the family unit create that and support that, I think becomes part of both the challenge and the opportunity. So, for me, I took that. It wasn't like we sat down and said, "Oh, that's your role and this is my role,"
Right.
right? Yet at the same time, it was also just this much more fluid thing that wasn't set on an expectation that couldn't be possible.
I think you need to say that twice. It's the expectation that you being the breadwinner also wasn't impossible either. It's not something like, oh no, of course not. I'm the man. I'm going to do this.
These were equally on the table, right? Wherever that sort of went, there was no like, oh no, that's not what we're going to do, or no, that's not the way we're set up. More like, okay, where does that come from? But that starts, I think, Jackie, from a very it get more egalitarian space, right? It's got to start from both people being very confident and independent in their own being to be able to then come together and figure out how that operates inside a system. Because you're as you build your family, that becomes a system like any other. It becomes an organization. It becomes a
That's
corporation.
what I was going to say, that it's not different. It's not that different from attracting talent. It's literally finding that person that you and that in those roles. And the fact that you said you guys it wasn't like you had the kind of relationship where you being the breadwinner couldn't be possible, but yet you both had to come to that relationship whole and open to whatever was going to be possible. So I wondered, from your standpoint, if you saw yourself as potentially being the breadwinner too. So he didn't say no, I'm the man, but did you also think I could possibly be the person who's taking care of our family? Did you see yourself that way? Did that evolve over time?
Yeah, for sure. I guess I never questioned that it couldn't be. So maybe it's not that I sort of thought to myself yes or no, but more like, was it ever something that was off the table for me? No. Did I believe that I could achieve and deliver on whatever I set my mind out to? Yes. Now, did that come from a very strong, like, bringing from my mother, who was also very independent, right? But yet, I came from a very patriarchal family, right? Where this was, the man's role and the woman's role. These were much more delineated from where I came from. In my broader family, in my, more, nucleus family, my sister and I, and my upbringing there. But I also think, I don't know, as you start to form your own personality and your own independence about that, I think there's things that you take from all of these experiences and you say, oh, I like that, and I don't want to do that, and I like that, and I won't ever do that. And so I think those started to create the path of then shaping who I was looking for as a partner, what I valued, what I cared about, what was important to me. And then that started to shape the people I started to hang out with, and the people that I started to like associate with, and ultimately the people I dated and the people that I, considered potentially partnership material. Like that all had to be, in play, I think.
Exactly. And it kind of goes back to that whole alignment. So as you had a strong foundation, as it sounds like your mom was a pretty strong woman. She was an entrepreneur. It sounds like your dad
still is.
Oh my! How old is she now? Look at her.
Yeah, she's like in her early 70s, and yeah, she's still
the boss.
She's still running the show. Yes,
I love it. But here's the thing: is you have that as your first foray into seeing what's possible, is seeing your mom doing that, and then looking for alignment in the universe for that is kind of what that sort of speaks to. And then as a result of that, that's the people who are showing up for you, because kind of like you put that out in the universe, right? And I love that. And I think that a lot of women listening might wrestle with this whole dynamic of, money, relationships, finding a partner, and just you talking about this journey of finding your partner. It's clear you've learned some key lessons about choosing a partner. And I want to know what stands out most from that journey for you.
Yeah. And knowing we were going to have this conversation, and knowing that I was like thinking about these things, it's oftentimes upon reflection that you start to see patterns or trends that happen. I would like to think that we're also smart, that we do these sort of things. So like, in line and sequence with like a always a plan that's like 1, 2, 3 steps. But I think what's the guiding principles about those things are the things that, I wanted to try and point out. And so I think, there was a couple things for me. I come from a European background, right? And those have much more delineated roles, right? They have much more defined roles in them. And good or bad, that's not really the issue. It was really more around how I integrated with them. Right. And I've seen roles that are very gender based, and yet still hold a lot of power in both of those positions, right? In terms of like influence on the family and all these kinds of things. So they have different strengths and weaknesses in each. I think for me, I was purposefully looking away from that model. I was purposefully and consciously thinking about, where is it that the person would support my journey? I was always very ambitious. I was always very driven by the difference I could make. But then also when I was in my corporate career, for sure, about, how much influence I had, how much either relational power or influence I had, how much positional power at times I had. And so these were things that were, I knew that I was going to strive for. And so I definitely knew I needed a strong, I definitely knew I needed a strong person beside me. My personality is such that I understood these things about myself. And so there was no way that was going to work with somebody who wouldn't give me a run for my money.
So what I'm hearing is you basically were seeking out someone who was going to be supportive of your ambition. And you saw, you come from an immigrant family, where the roles might be more traditional in terms of what a man does, what a woman does. Trust me, it doesn't look any different if you have a West Indian background. It's immigrants have a lot of similarities in terms of these things. But you also know yourself, and you know what you want, and it sounds like you knew you wanted someone who would be supportive of having an ambitious partner.
And was as equally ambitious. So I don't want to miss this part either, because this is actually the piece then where we could support each other, right? Because it wasn't like, oh, you do this and you have this and I end up doing this. No, it was like, hey, we both want to have a well-functioning, very successful family. And in order to do that, we both needed to be met in the places that we needed, right? So we both were ambitious insofar as what we could do, what we could accomplish, and what we wanted to achieve. And that helped push each other to be the best that we could be. And that's a big thing, right? Because if the person sitting back doesn't really want you to be the best version of that, these other things start, they are harder to manage.
I would think so. And I as you were saying that, because sometimes, and everybody has to define what what do they need from a relationship, and if they're being supported and what that means. But I imagine that you being the breadwinner would also change how boundaries and balance get navigated, because if you're both successful, taking care of others while making sure you're cared for too, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. You take turns. You take turns. I think you actually, it sounds a bit trite, and I don't mean it in like a 50-50 kind of way, but I think it's like There are times when it was supporting my career, which means that, my partner needed to step back, do more things, around picking up half the, more than half the load. And then
Right.
there were times when, he needed that support from me and I needed to rearrange so that I could pick up more than 50% of the load. And that's the agreements we made. And do we keep track of that? No, because there were
Oh, you got
opportunities
it.
there were opportunities along the way that pushed, early in my career, that pushed me further. So I traveled a lot. We ended up having, a daughter, and that meant that we needed somebody to, stay at home more often. And it just became like, okay, let's just look at where this makes the most financial sense for us and where this makes the most sense. And this was not about, okay, woman, man, gender, whatever. It was really economics that was like, okay, look, this makes the most sense. And why not? We could equally do this.
Yeah. And as you say that, I just think it means boundaries and balance means having a partner who's willing to share, as you said, the workload with you, not necessarily see themselves in those gendered roles that we were talking about. I'm the man. I
Yeah.
don't do those things.
Yes.
And really also that might mean at some points you have to, if you are in a relationship and you're defining both of us want to be successful, what conversations do you need to have where,
Oh my gosh.
okay,
Yeah.
financially you're doing really well now and I want to support you to continue to rise. What does that mean I have to do? And vice versa. But being able to have those open conversations and having the mindset where
Yeah.
you want both partners to win.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not an either or, it's an and. Like it, you know what I mean? It's and that requires, to your point, that requires a lot of conversation, that requires a lot of like speaking the unspoken pieces, right? Like the ones that are like, no, I just expect you to do this. I'm not going to say what it is that I need, but I expect you to do that, and that you should expect. No, 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 no. That's like,
yeah, that's a disaster right there. I hear you.
no. Yes, that's like, no, early on
Expectations are
that,
killer.
yeah, early on that needs to be conversations of like, what would that look like if, hey, how does that work when, like, what about this and what about, and those conversations become, the foundations of then the expectation that gets delivered on. And I can't stress that, more, that communication is really like a really key component of that.
Well,
And
you
and not this unspoken expectation.
yeah, expectations a killer. And as you were saying that, I was thinking, we've done a lot of this. Full transparency, Angela's a client of mine. So we've done a lot of scenario planning, right, Angela?
Yeah.
And it's almost like the same kind of conversations you have to have with a potential partner is, what if we were in this scenario? What if we were in this scenario? What would your expectations be, or what would you want to happen to
Mhm.
really get to know what that might look like, in
Yeah.
terms of what does supportive mean to you? What even like what does it being supportive mean if we're both,
Yeah.
as you said, like having a lot of those conversations
Yeah.
and making sure your values line up around
Yeah.
things.
Yeah. We my husband and I often say we're in the relationship business. We're like, nothing is more important than the relationship we have, right? Like I have best girlfriends and I have, besties and all these things, but at the very core, my partner is absolutely my center, my rock, my best friend. And so having that as sort of the position point or the starting point then just makes a lot of those conversations so much easier, because his success is a reflection of me. My success is a reflection of him, not as my own, not because we need it and they're codependent on each other, but because they are the best version of what that person brings to the relationship.
What you're saying reminds me so much of leadership in business, right?
Oh
Just
my
like
gosh.
leaders need strong, supportive teams to thrive. High earning women need partners who are going to rise with them, not against them. And it's
Mhm.
it's almost like you're saying it's really about building that right team at home as well as at work, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, yes. Yes. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Yes.
I love it. Well, you kind of wrapped it up really easily. And I have one last question around this, which is tell me how having children impacted your relationship and money dynamic in the household. I've read an interesting fact that I didn't know, but made sense, which is that women that have children, as they have more children in particular, they're less likely to be the breadwinner. So, how do you think women trying to build their career and having children should navigate the role as a breadwinner with their partner?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because that's you weren't surprised, and I'm not surprised by that either, right? Because that the load and the responsibility just
Oh, yeah.
becomes like exponentially, greater. I can imagine. I
Yeah.
have,
I'm giving up after one or two.
yeah, I have one.
Two for
Um,
sure.
yeah, so I have one, so I don't know, what that is, but I hats off to those families that juggle like more than 2 or 3 children.
I know these ladies and I'm like, I worship them. I'm
Yes.
telling you.
Yes. And I would also say and I would hope that they have very strong support systems that actually,
They do.
support them too,
They
right?
do.
Because that's the way that gets done. Nobody does this path alone. Whether it's a great team, a great, a great partner, a great, family, a great, parental
Nanny.
network, like yes, hired help, like whatever that is, right? And I think that that's true about life. Nobody walks the path alone in terms of like getting it done and all the things that it takes to, you know, support those things. And I think that that's a lot about balance. Sure, it's also a lot about celebrating what works. It's so interesting when we had Elizabeth, like probably like most families, we started on the position of okay, I was going to go on mat leave, and then after mat leave we put Elizabeth in daycare, and after that, my husband would be back at work and I would be at work, and we would go on with that component. um, you know, you just look at this little person and you think like, I don't know how to put them in daycare. I don't know how I don't know how that works,
Yeah.
right? I don't know how when you work so hard to build that, you then, that works. And so for our family, we came at a bit of a crossroads around what do we do? And at that time, many, many, many years ago, it was like, okay, back to what I was saying, who has the majority of the influence in this particular situation in terms of economics and
Right.
and what did that look like, and then it made sense for my husband to step back and stay home, and for me to continue my career because we could see a path to more than where we were and more options. And
Working.
so, and
Right.
that went on for many, many years, right? Now that's not to say that he was only doing that. He was doing lots of other things. And
No, no, I know your husband. Seriously ambitious man too.
yes,
Like talking
so
about community again, transparency.
yeah,
These two people are extremely ambitious people.
yes. So the reality is, but that became like, okay, but that's what's good for our family unit, not like, no, that's a a cultural expectation that somebody has that we make a decision about something. I heard from a client one time, and it was so, uh, if women who are listening to this, like I'm sure that we've all felt this at some point. Some people label it mom guilt. I hate the phrase, but it's like a thing. I had a client, never forget. It was a very big customer of mine. I was traveling. I traveled quite a bit in my job, and he said to me, "Oh, I see. You're the dad." And I said, "What?" He said, "You're the dad.
Yeah,
You're
yeah,
the
yeah.
one who comes home after like late at night, and you get like the end of bath time, and you get like the tuck in, right?" And I was like, "Oh my God." Like I was so
How did you feel about that? Because actually, I had this exact same conversation with my girlfriend. She's a university professor and she goes to a lot of conferences. And her husband sounds very similar to your husband. And she's like, "Yeah, we've come to the realization that I'm probably more the dad in the
yeah.
relationship." And
I
that was
was
the first time
like,
I heard that.
I was
And I
like,
love it.
oh, I
And I was
don't
like,
think.
you could do whatever. You could be whatever you want
Yeah,
and define
but
the terms of your relationship so it works for you. So I love that.
yes, but it was such a like, that's like cultural norms like coming smack at you like right there in the like that is that in a nutshell right there, right? That is a gender bias, a stereotype, like whatever that is, but it was like and to label it so like in my face and to
How
my
did you
face,
feel?
I was like,
She was good with it. She's like, I'm good with being the dad.
yeah, I for a moment it made me sad,
Yeah, I
but
was going
then
to say, because
at
there's guilt there too, right?
yeah, but then in another moment, I thought to myself, in that other moment, I thought to myself, "Oh my gosh, that must feel terrible for dads too."
You not necessarily. I haven't heard any dad complain that just take a, I don't know. I'm going to take a poll after this, but
Oh,
yeah, I
I
haven't
don't
had
know. I don't
one
know.
dad
I
complain.
I would feel like I thought to myself, "Wow, that's not a great feeling for dads either." Like if that's how that feels because it does come with some guilt. It does come with like what am I missing? It
Yes,
does come with
absolutely.
these
Yes.
things that what is the cost of what I'm doing to supporting my family. And so I think again it's like having those conversations around okay, how can we both feel like we're contributing and that we're both adding value, not just a paycheck value, but like, and that's the only thing we deem to be important in our family because it's not. Then, like, what are those other things that make supportive, like, make it supportive? And to be clear, in my dynamic, in my family dynamic, there is no world where I could achieve what I have achieved or even decide to leave my corporate
Mhm.
job and my corporate money and funds and all these things without somebody who's like, Ange, we got this. We can
Yeah,
figure this out
yeah,
and we can like, let's have a conversation about it. What would it look like? How would we do
yeah.
it? Like all these things. Like there's just no
Your
way.
your husband's awesome. I met him. He's amazing. But yeah, you know
After 30 years, he's definitely mine for good.
well, I was just going to come back to because I feel like I'd be remiss. I think that so much of these gender roles are roles that we just have to, as women, talk through. What does it mean to us? Can we decide that whatever relationships look like, if we're deciding that we don't want to take on a specific gender role, we can define what that means for our relationship. Then that's really the key to this, right? Is
Yeah.
to find what it
Yes.
means for you. So if you decide you want to be the dad, if you decide you want to be the mom,
Yes.
for whatever that means, because the reason I say this, Angela, is just so that women don't feel guilt if that's what ends up happening, or
Of
even happens
course.
for a period of time, just because of what's happening in
Of
their world at
course.
that time, right?
Of
So
course. Of course. And that's not
it's so important.
and I want to make sure that's not my intention either, right?
No, I
Because
know it
that's
isn't.
yeah, it's absolutely like that's the beauty of it. It should be what you choose is important for you, not what or you and your partner, not what you believe is what the job is we should hold or that we should feel bad about that. And that wanting a family and being ambitious and being a breadwinner
Yeah,
and doing
right,
is these are mutually exclusive because they are not. They can live in the same place
right,
and be successful.
right, right. So define it on your terms. Hiring community, like how can you define these things on your terms without guilt or judgment and not having it imposed on you based on what society tells you that should look like? So
Mm.
before we wrap up, Angela, let's do a quick hiring women fire round. And you just
All
need quick
right.
answers.
Okay.
First thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready?
Yes. Hit
Awesome.
me.
Okay. Okay. So a couple of questions. One is, if you could tell your younger self one thing about love and money, what would it be?
Hmm. Don't 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 pit them against each other.
Ooh,
They're not at two ends of a they're not at two ends of a scale. Like they're what I said earlier, like they're not they can be an and. They're not like you choose money or you choose love. No.
love it. Love it. Okay. Biggest financial lesson you both navigated as a couple.
Hmm. Biggest financial lesson that when you earn more, you spend more. And
I'm
as you
pleading the
can
fifth on this one.
Yeah. And as you continue to earn more, you continue to like your lifestyle creeps up, right? And so how do you enjoy the things that lifestyle has earned for you, and yet at the same time make sure that you're thinking about the long version of that, especially as we think about how relationships change and then have children come in, and perhaps fortunately or unfortunately how couples split, like all these things that whatever your version of is right now in the early stages will not be the version later. So plan for a little bit of that.
So have some extra cash. Have some extra cash. Know that that what do they call it? The as soon as as your income goes up, so does your expenses.
Yeah. The keeping up with the Joneses.
Creep, lifestyle creep. How are you
lifestyle creep.
That?
Yeah,
is a really important thing too for us to talk about. Angela, thank you so much for joining me on this today. Your story, both as a business leader and a breadwinner, is going to resonate with so many of our listeners. And for everyone tuning in, if you'd like to connect with Angela or learn more about her work with Lead HR, I'm going to put the link of her details in our show notes. So look out for that. So that's it for today's episode of the Hiring Women podcast. And if you love this conversation, I'd love for you to stay connected. Follow our firm's LinkedIn page at Team Jackie Porter. That's where we share our insights, resources, and updates that you won't want to miss. And if you'd like to keep listening to more episodes of this podcast, if you're like, okay, I need to find more of this, you can find us on all your favorite audio platforms like Spotify, Deezer, Amazon Music, Player FM, and more. Just search for the Hiring Women podcast, hit follow so you never miss a conversation. And remember, being a hiring woman isn't just about money. It's about freedom. It's about choice. It's about surrounding yourself with the right team, whether that's in business or in love, as Angela has said. And I'm Jackie Porter. This has been the Hiring Women podcast. So ladies, remember, in relationships, instead of just falling in love, be intentional. Keep choosing partners who are going to rise with you. So keep building, keep earning, and keep living the life that you want. Until next time.
Amen.
See you next time, everyone.
Shatter is ceiling, G's fierce and octane.
Did you enjoy?